thank you for coming to Long-Term Care Planning 101, Insulating Yourself from a Long-Term Care Crisis. My name is Adam Eisenberg, and I am the president of Eisenberg Insurance located in Bexley, right down the street. I have been in the business for 18 years, and I know many of you find that very hard to believe. Not much gray hair up here. But I have spent the majority of my career working with individuals such as yourselves, educating them about long-term care and long-term care planning. I'm going to step out of the way now and give you full access to our screen and enjoy the workshop. The reality is there are consequences to living a long life. Your family's financial, emotional, physical well-being will severely be altered should you become frail and need care. Nothing will pay for the plan of care other than your retirement portfolio or your savings, which were never allocated to do so. By being proactive, no matter your financial situation, is key to minimizing any collateral damage that could occur or would occur by not having a plan. There are a lot of facts with regard to Alzheimer's disease and dementia and living a long life and long-term care, but I'd like to focus on these 4 bullet points. If you are over 65 years old, there is a 70% chance of requiring some type of long-term care in your lifetime. Granted, we don't know if this is 8 years in an Alzheimer's wing, 3 years in a nursing home, or maybe 4 hours in a hospice facility, but the numbers are pretty clear. There is a 70% chance that we will need some type of care. The 55 to 65 population accounts for the fastest growing segment of newly diagnosed Alzheimer's patients in the United States. And by the looks of many of your faces, it seems like you were unaware of this statistic. And it's something that needs to be focused on. The average cost of home health care in Ohio is $20 an hour. Is it a safe assumption that everybody in the room wants to stay at home instead of going into a facility?
Yep.
Yes?
Yep.
Okay. Well, an assisted living facility on average costs $45,000 per year. And a private room in a nursing home currently averages $79,000 a year in Ohio. And depending on where you're from, if you're from Cleveland, it's going to be higher. If you're from Cincinnati, it's going to be lower. But the average in Ohio is right around $79,000. Sure beats living in Alaska. Longevity has been increasing. We just talked about that. That means we're living longer. And this has absolutely nothing to do with our quality of life. $79,000 a year in a nursing home. For those that receive care in their homes, those that opted for home health care because they wanted to age in place, the average cost is $12,000 a month. If we were to use a 3.5% medical inflation rate, and which is pretty conservative based on inflation as of late, in 10 years the cost of care will have grown to $111,000. In 20 years, that $79,000 today will be up to $157,000. On the bottom half of the slide, I've illustrated the average length of care for a man at 2.2 years and an average length of care in a facility for a woman at 3.7 years. And these are numbers that we've been using for the last couple of years, and they're pretty accurate by the looks of many people's expressions and faces. I frequently hear, oh, my mom was in a facility for 4 years, or my dad was in a facility for a year and a half. But these numbers are pretty average. Unfortunately, they're skewed because we don't know how long someone was cared for at home by a spouse or a child or a caregiver before they got to the facility. So, for the women in the room, that 3.7 year stay will cost you $410,000 in 10 years. Should it occur in 20 years, that will have cost $580,000. Alzheimer's disease has an average length of care of 8 years. And in 20 years, at a 3.5% inflation rate, the cost for that period will be around $1.25 million. And Alzheimer's doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're black or white, Catholic or Jewish, it doesn't matter. There's two simple questions that I always ask people to ask themselves. First, you may never need care, and hopefully you never will, but if you did, how would that affect your family? How would that affect your spouse? Many times caring for the chronically ill loved one can make the caregiver just as chronically ill. If there's no spouse involved, when there are just kids in the picture, they often carry the burden. Usually it's the eldest daughter that quits her job, moves in with her parents, or moves her parents in with her, and gives up her career and puts her life on hold, because that's what many children would feel obligated to do. Your family dynamics change. When informal care is needed, it may not be shared equally amongst the adult children. Often one sibling bears the burden, and it can affect the relationship with the others. Imagine when one child lives around the corner and the other one lives out of state. It's a lot easier for the one around the corner to stop by and help take care of mom or dad. Unnecessary losses. You can never avoid all losses. However, the unnecessary spiritual, emotional, financial, and familial losses could be mitigated when you're prepared. Okay, so it looks like by the body language I'm reading that everyone in the room knows that they are going to get old, but they're not going to need care. Okay, but let's just say you did need care. How are you going to pay for it? Well, I'm going to let you in on a little surprise. There's only 3 choices when it comes to paying for care. The government has a program called Medicaid, which many of you are maybe familiar with. You could always pay out of your pockets and utilize your own assets to pay for care. And this is what I call paying retail cost, or paying dollar for care. Or you could purchase a long-term care insurance policy and leverage the risk. Take it off yourself and put it on another party. Put it on the insurance company. And there are 2 types of long-term care insurance that are available. One is traditional long-term care, which has been getting a lot of publicity in the local papers. And I actually have included the Columbus Dispatch article, Seniors Face Spikes in Long-Term Care Premiums. This was in the Sunday paper 2 weeks ago, and these articles are appearing more and more frequently. And the other option is an asset-based long-term care plan, and we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Well, the number one option is the government, or Medicaid. Unfortunately, Medicaid has numerous eligibility restrictions. You can't wake up one morning and say, you know what, I'm going to let the government pay. It doesn't work with long-term care. There are spend-down rules, and you can have no more than $1,500 to your name in the state of Ohio. There's a look-back period, and that is 60 months. And what that means is that the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services will take a snapshot of all of your assets within the last 5 years, see where they were 5 years ago, and see where they are right now. There is a period of restricted coverage, and there's also limited home health care benefits. In Ohio, there's a program called Passport. So you must plan ahead in order to qualify for Medicaid. Well, what is Medicaid and what does it cover? Everybody says the government's going to pay, Medicaid's going to pay, but what is it? Medicaid is a federal, state, and locally funded program, and it varies from state to state. Medicaid provides benefits for those that need long-term custodial care, who are permanently ill, injured, or disabled, and financially eligible. Medicaid will assist people with nursing home care, including custodial care, that are having difficulties with the activities of daily living, such as bathing, dressing, feeding, and going to the bathroom, as well as those who need skilled nursing care. Well, if Medicaid doesn't sound like an attractive option for you, you can always self-fund your long-term care expense. Makes sense. I mean, why buy an insurance policy for something we hope we never use? Well, when you're self-funding and you're paying dollar for care, these are the places that you can go to help pay for your care. You could always tap into the equity of your home, other real estate you own or other properties, but who knows what the value will be when you need it. Will you have to sell that property to pay for your care and settle for what you're offered? You could always go towards your retirement assets, but they've already been allocated for retirement income. Is that a safe assumption? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of heads going up and down. You could go to your investment assets, but are they guaranteed to continue to grow and outpace inflation? And what's the taxation issue going to be in your income? It's a safe assumption that your income has already been allocated for your daily living expenses. I see more head bobbing up and down. So long-term care can not only threaten your assets, but also your income. Okay, so we've decided we don't want to pay dollar for dollar. We decided that we don't think we're going to qualify for Medicaid. So it comes down to long-term care insurance. Well, traditional long-term care insurance, the one that's mentioned numerous times in the article that I've shared with you, is a use it or lose it proposition. Well, why do I say that? Traditional long-term care serves one purpose, going on claim. The last thing that anybody in this room wants to do. Long-term care insurance is owned by 5 to 6% of the American population. Why so few? Well, it's expensive. It's very expensive. A couple, both 60 years old, could easily spend $6,000 a year in premium for a 5-year benefit with a $5,000 a month long-term care benefit. If you add on an inflation rider, the premium can easily go to over $10,000. Now think about it. Yes, these are big numbers, and it looks like a few people in this room have long-term care.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you buy a policy when you're 60 years old, and you spend $5,000 a year, and you get really, really, really lucky and die in your sleep when you're 80 years old? Now, assuming that your policy never had a single premium increase, $6,000 a year for 20 years, that's $120,000 that's down the drain. Well, existing long-term care plans have recently experienced some significant increases. The article that you're looking at talks about the increase that CNA just shared with a couple 100,000 of their policyholders. And this is a letter that was received by one of my clients, a 28% increase. And the 90% increase by John Hancock is right here. This was received by an 83-year-old woman in Minneapolis. And her premiums went from $7,400 a year up to a little over $14,000. Between 2004 and 2009, new long-term care insurance sales have declined by 51%. Well, if you want to know the reasons of why, look at number 1 and number 2 right above. In the late 1980s, 1989 to be exact, a few top-rated insurance companies created financial vehicles now known as asset-based care plans. ABC plans for short are the perfect mix of self-funding and long-term care coverage. In short, they guarantee that an expanded pool of money, significantly greater than your deposit, will be available to pay your long-term care medical expenses should the need arise, and thus preserving your family's inheritance. Should you dodge the long-term care bullet, and I hope we all do, a death benefit is passed down to your beneficiaries. These plans can be funded with not only cash, CDs, life insurance, annuities, and stocks, but they can be funded with IRAs and other qualified assets. Is anyone in the room over 70 years old? Yes? 1, 2, 3, 7 of you are. Well, you've probably heard the term R70, okay, 8 of you are now, just realized how old you are. There's something called a required minimum distribution, also known as an RMD. When you're 70 and a half years old, the government says you have to take out a percentage of your qualified assets and spend them. This money has been growing tax-free, tax-deferred since it was deposited into the account. And our wonderful government says you've got to stimulate the economy and start spending your money. Well, when you're using a qualified asset to fund one of these plans, the monies that used help satisfy the required minimum distribution. Single premiums as well as guaranteed annual premiums are available. I had to underline the word guaranteed. I would have printed it out larger if I could have figured that out. But that's one of the reasons people are dropping traditional long-term care insurance. Those premiums aren't guaranteed. Joint contracts. A huge benefit of these policies is that two people, including a husband and wife, same-sex couples, or even a parent and child, can be covered by one plan. So the benefits are numerous, but sharing the underwriting risk and having access to the same pool of money for care is very attractive. So when we have one spouse that may not be in the best of health and one that is, we can blend the two healths and their ages together and create a plan that they can both share. Best of all, if you decide that this policy no longer meets your needs, your premium will be refunded to you. You can't lose. This is a concept of how long-term care, asset-based long-term care works. If we were to look at a typical asset portfolio, we have an aggressive area where our assets are positioned for significant growth. We have a moderate segment where our assets are positioned for some growth with the acceptance of some downside risk. And then we have our conservative pot, where our assets are positioned for conservation of principal. And often, these products have guarantees associated with them. In this scenario, we were to carve out $125,000 of the conservative chunk of money and allow that to buy a $252,000 insurance policy. Now, this cash value life insurance policy can be used for long-term care purposes that both husband and wife can draw from, and there's a death benefit available. Should they not use the benefit for care, their beneficiaries would be the recipient of $252,000. Yes?
This sounds way too good to be true.
Well, many people ask me that, and the reason it's not too good to be true is because it has a component to it that has stood the test of time. A cash value whole life insurance chassis has been available for 150, 200 years. And cash value life insurance policies not only offer guaranteed premiums and guaranteed growth, but a guaranteed death benefit. Yes?
What if I don't have 125,000?
Well, many people ask that as well. This was the easiest way that I could illustrate this, but there are options available that can be paid on an annual basis, a monthly basis, over 10 years, 20 years. And those premiums are guaranteed. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Well, okay, now I have a long-term care policy. When do I get to start using it? Well, long-term care benefits are paid once benefit triggers have been satisfied. The benefit triggers that every long-term care insurance policy has are the inability to perform 2 of the 6 ADLs, or activities of daily living, such as bathing, continence, dressing, feeding, toileting, and transferring, or the diagnosis of a cognitive impairment, such as Alzheimer's disease, or Parkinson's, or even dementia. And care can be received either in a nursing home, assisted living facility, adult daycare, hospice, or at home for home health care. About 8 years ago, there were 2 laws that were passed that significantly impacted long-term care planning: the Deficit Reduction Act and the Pension Protection Act. Both laws, or both acts, encouraged preparation for personal long-term care planning. They reduced the reliance on government programs, or at least that was their intent, and they provide tax advantages to those that prepare. The DRA was signed into law in February of 2006, and the 3 major sets of provisions related to long-term care were that it changed the Medicaid eligibility for long-term care from 3 years to 5 years, and that is the look-back period that we had talked about earlier. They also changed the home equity exemption limit up to $536,000, And basically that means that if a Medicaid application is made, up to $536,000 of equity could be protected in the home. And that number is adjusted for inflation every year. Annuity treatments are a little different. If you are applying for Medicaid and you own an annuity, the state must be listed as the beneficiary of the annuity. They want their money after you pass away and there's a debt owed to Medicaid. The Pension Protection Act is the other act that was passed in 2006, and this act stated that certain annuities could be treated as tax-qualified long-term care insurance. And in order for that to happen, the annuities must be funded with after-tax premium sources or non-qualified sources. And they must meet the guidelines set forth in the HIPAA Act of 1996. And HIPAA is the law that sets standards for long-term care insurance benefits to be considered income tax-free. This is an example of how the Pension Protection Act works. If you have an existing non-qualified annuity, one that was funded with after-tax dollars, let's say you bought it for $50,000, and over a 15-year period it grew to $300,000. So you have a $250,000 gain. If you were to do a 1035 exchange, which is a tax-free transfer of monies into a HIPAA-qualified eligible annuity, then your benefits would be received tax-free when they do come out for long-term care expenses. If you currently own an annuity, and by the looks of many of your facial expressions, you own annuities, call your insurance company up and ask them if you will receive a 1099-R or a 1099-LTC should you start drawing down your annuity for LTC expenses. There are 4 insurance companies in the United States, it might be up to 5 now, that offer Pension Protection Act qualified long-term care annuities. So if you want to know if you have one of those products, let me know and or share that information with me, and I'll let you know if you have the right product. So how will you protect your assets from a long-term care disability? Cash, brokerage accounts, retirement assets, your home equity, investment properties, or insurance. These are the only choices. Thank you for coming. I hope this information was informative to you. Many people, when they see my presentation, they look at the slides, and based on facial expressions, I can tell that many people are unaware of a lot of the new options that are available in the market to protect from long-term care. And the attractiveness of the options that I recommend is that you're never in jeopardy of losing anything should you get real lucky and not have a long-term care claim. Your beneficiaries are going to be the recipients of everything that you have. So thank you for coming, and please feel free to pull me aside if you have any questions. Thank you.